Okay, gentlemen. Ms. Clifton.
This is case number 2400418 Stephen Ambrose et al. Versus Dr. Shaw et al.
Counsel appearances for the record.
Thank you, Your Honor. Paul Dillon appearing on behalf of the plaintiffs.
Morning, Your Honor. A. Williams on behalf of defendant Dr. Shaw and Associates in Gastroenterology, PC.
Okay, we have two motions this morning. I think, Mr. Norrie, I want to start with the motion for SD relative to the genuine issue of material fact regarding the standard of care.
Thank you. I will preface it by saying there is significant overlap between the two motions that are still pending between the court. Both have to do with Dr. Wine's standard of care testimony. But I'm going to start with the lack of, let me make sure with the overlap that I'm not going to be repetitive. So the lack of genuine issue of material fact has to do with Dr. Wine's testimony of what the
Well,
standard.
let me ask you, maybe I jumped the gun. Would you prefer, is it okay to start with this one?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I just want to make sure because the court likely has those materials in front of her and is focused on that. I wanted to make sure that I was tailoring my discussion to that argument and to those exhibits.
Okay.
So as the court knows, this case has everything to do with the alleged delay in diagnosis of Mr. Ambrose's pancreatic cancer in 2021 after he was referred to my client, Dr. Shaw, given some findings on imaging studies in February of 2021. So plaintiff's lone gastroenterology expert, Dr. Wine, testified as to his standard of care criticisms against Dr. Shaw. And there was really one main one that has to do with how this could have been diagnosed sooner. And that was his testimony that the standard of care required an endoscopic ultrasound with fine needle aspiration. And so what an endoscopic ultrasound is, and I'm not going to belabor this point because we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, but it's where a scope goes in through the mouth and allows visualization that way, as opposed to an MRI, which is imaging that's external, at least not invasive. An endoscopic ultrasound with fine needle aspiration is a different study. It's an add-on, so to speak, where you're doing both and you're aspirating fluid and tissue from the pancreas and pancreatic cysts in order to run pathology on it, cytology, get biomarkers. It's considered an invasive study because it carries risks of things like pancreatitis, infection, perforation, etc. So what the different societies in this case that monitor pancreatic cancer screening for individuals like Mr. Ambrose have done is populate guidelines to say, we want to see these certain features in order for a gastroenterologist to recommend different studies. So what Dr. Wine testified to is that Dr. Shaw was required under the standard of care to order an endoscopic ultrasound with fine needle aspiration within the first 3 to 6 months of seeing him. So based on the February of 2021 MRI that prompted Mr. Ambrose's referral to Dr. Shaw, the findings of that study required Dr. Shaw to order an EUS with FNA within 3 to 6 months. That's on page 130 of his deposition, as well as 136, 119, page 70. Basically, he said over and over, EUS with FNA, at multiple times, confirming after a myriad of confirmation, that was his testimony, EUS with FNA.
And that's the acronym for
Endoscopic ultrasound with
fine
needle aspiration. Correct. Yes. What Dr. Wine also testified to is that there are 5 societies that set the standard of care with their guidelines of when to order various studies for monitoring patients with potential pancreatic cancer, these cysts that they want to monitor to see when there are those high risk stigmata or worrisome features to prompt further testing. So he cited to, and Dr. Wine testified that if you comply with any one of these 5 guidelines, a gastroenterologist is reasonable and appropriate, because they all differ slightly. They agree on a lot, but they differ in a few different ways. But Dr. Wine said a reasonable and prudent gastroenterologist, if they follow one of these guidelines, they have complied with the standard of practice. That's on page 58 and 59 of his deposition. Essentially, they set the standard of care, in his opinion. Those 5 societies are the AGA, the American Gastroenterology Association, the ACG, the American College of Gastroenterologists. There's an international consensus, or it's sometimes referred to as CAPS, C-A-P-S, a European evidence-based guideline, and the American College of Radiologists. Any one of those 5 would be complying with the standard of care. And so what the defense did is cited to each and every one of those guidelines in its brief and confirmed that Dr. Shaw did exactly what those guidelines suggested based on the February 21 MRI findings. So the February of 2021 MRI findings, and this is not in dispute, the largest cyst was 8 millimeters in size, and the interpreting radiologist said no worrisome features or high-risk stigmata. Dr. Wine did not review the imaging. In fact, he's not qualified to review the imaging. He doesn't do it in his normal practice. So he's relying on the interpretation of that MRI by the board-certified radiologist. And so again, that's undisputed in this case that per the interpretation in February of 2021, the largest cyst was 8 millimeters. There were no worrisome features or high-risk stigmata seen on any of those, seen on that MRI. So
No worrisome stigmata or what?
no worrisome features or high-risk stigmata.
Okay.
And a lot of times those terms are used interchangeably. They're referred to as worrisome features, high-risk features, suspicious features, things like that, basically to signal what radiologists are looking for where now alarm bells are going off. Whether it's, hey, they look solid in appearance, they're hypoenhancing, there's pancreatic ductal dilation, there's growth of greater than 3 millimeters over the course of a year, things like that. That's what high-risk stigmata is. In February of 2021, none of those were present. Mr. Ambrose had an MRI from 2 years earlier in 2019, where there was some growth from those, but it was not at a rapid pace that would qualify as high-risk stigmata per any of the guidelines. All the guidelines are clear, 3 millimeters over the course of 1 year. None of them say 3 millimeters over the course of 2 years or expand on that. So what the defense did is cite to the guidelines that Dr. Wine testified to set the standard of care as to what he determined Mr. Ambrose to be a high-risk individual. So Mr. Ambrose had some familial history of pancreatic cancer, and so Dr. Wine considered him to be at high risk for pancreatic cancer. These guidelines are specific to high-risk individuals, exactly as Mr. Ambrose, they're claiming he is. The guidelines are specific to him. The consensus of those guidelines, and the defense cited to each and every one of them, and it also cited to what's referred to as a meta-analysis, where it looked at all of the guidelines and kind of synthesized, compared and contrasted, tried to see which, if any, was better at diagnosing early stages of pancreatic cancer, and came to a conclusion. And that is cited as Defendant's Exhibit D. It looked at the AGA, CAPS, the ACG, all specific to high-risk individuals. That concluded in MRI or EUS, not both. It was very specific for that. MRI or EUS should be used. It made no mention of using an EUS FNA, which is what Dr. Wine testified to was required by the standard of care. It's just not there for the findings that were present in February of 2021 based on that MRI. There is nothing in that MRI to suggest high-risk features or worrisome stigmata. And the lack of literature support, the guidelines suggest MRI or EUS. Dr. Shaw ordered a repeat MRI to be done 6 months later. That is consistent with each and every one of these guidelines. The plaintiff cannot point to any one of these guidelines to say, right here, here is where it says an EUS FNA was required by the standard of care. Applying the February 2021 MRI, EUS FNA was required. There is no dispute that there aren't any high-risk features. The interpreting radiologist says so right there in the report in black and white. Again, Dr. Wine did not review that MRI. He did not, there are no allegations that it was misinterpreted in this case. And so now I'm making sure I focus just on the SD that's before the court and not the other one that has overlap to it. And so circling back to the 5 guidelines, Dr. Shaw complies with any one of them. He has complied with the standard of care. So, Judge, I would point you to
Let me just make sure, Mr. Tenori, it was the AGA,
yes,
the ACG, the American College of Gastroenterologists, and then it was CAPS, and then it was American College of Radiology, right?
correct.
And what was the
And
fifth one?
the European,
Okay, so there's CAPS and the European, right?
correct.
Okay, so that's what it was. European is separate from CAPS,
Mhm.
right? Okay,
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
the CAPS, it's an international one. It's sometimes referred to as the Japanese standard, or I think the lead author of it was Fukurora. I may be butchering that, but there's a few different terms for it. But yes, those are the 5.
Okay,
And
all right.
so if the court, one of the articles that the defense cited to Exhibit E basically compared all of these to each other. And it's in a nice clean table on page 14 that I pulled from the article, put it in the motion, where it looked at approach to surveillance of these exact pancreatic cystic lesions in Mr. Ambrose. And so each of those basically says for a cyst under 1 centimeter in size, MRIs are recommended. You can do EUSs if a patient doesn't want to undergo an MRI, but it's not required by the standard of care. And that's confirmed in plaintiff's own literature that they attached to their response brief in this case. And so plaintiff's own literature, Exhibit Q, and I'm quoting the study, says MRI is the test of choice because it's non-invasive, lack of radiation, and greater accuracy in assessing communication between the main duct and the cysts. So what this all comes down to, and I don't really have anything to respond to in terms of plaintiff's pushback here, Judge, and I want to emphasize that. In going through their response brief, at no point do they analyze these different guidelines and say, here's where Dr. Shaw violated the guidelines. Here's how he failed to comply, or they said that based on this in the imaging, he should have done that. There's no analysis like that in their response brief. It is completely unrebutted in this case. The literature that they did attach supports the defense. And I just cited one of those articles. And this isn't just my regurgitation of this. The defense offered affidavits from two board certified gastroenterologists, Dr. Duffy and Dr. Cutler, who say they screen patients like this. They're familiar with these guidelines. They use them all the time in their clinical experience in managing patients similar to Mr. Ambrose. And Dr. Shaw's ordering of the MRI to be done 6 months later based on that February 2021 MRI was in compliance with all of those guidelines, not just one, but all of them. There isn't an issue of fact here that Dr. Shaw complied with the guidelines that Dr. Wine testified set the standard of care. Any one of the five, and he has complied with the standard of care. It's not in dispute that he did so. Therefore, we're asking for summary disposition.
Mr. Dillon.
Thank you, Your Honor. There are a number of places to start, but I'm just going to start by pointing out that the standard of care is not solely based on a reaction to the February 2021 MRI. There is, Dr. Wine did testify extensively to the breaches of standard of care with respect to the reaction to the February 2021 MRI. And again, Your Honor, just to keep the court on the timeline here, there was an MRI in 2019 that was done by Dr. Mohindra. Dr. Mohindra was following Mr. Ambrose's hemochromatosis diagnosis. And in 2019, there was an MRI that did show some cysts. However, as you know, we acknowledge pancreatic cysts themselves are relatively commonplace. And the first sighting of these cysts was not of any particular. It was worth following, but not warranting any further action. And our expert acknowledges that nothing further was required at that time. However, Dr. Mohindra did order a follow-up MRI, which was done in February of 21. And it was that reading, Dr. Mohindra saw the report of the cysts in that case and says, holy cow, this is beyond my scope at this point. And sometimes Dr. Mohindra has been labeled a cancer doctor. He is a specific cancer doctor. He's a hematologist, but he was following on the hemochromatosis issue only, and did not claim any expertise in the area of dealing with these pancreatic cysts. In any event, what Dr. Mohindra does when he sees this MRI in February of 2021 is he says, hey, Mr. Ambrose, you need to be followed by a gastroenterologist who can properly respond to these cysts because they have changed. From the previous MRI till February 21, they have changed. And Dr. Shaw acknowledges that he was receiving this patient, Mr. Ambrose, for the specific purpose of monitoring these pancreatic cysts. He testified that although he was aware of Mr. Ambrose's family history with respect to pancreatic cancer, it made no difference to him. I mean, he says this flat out in his testimony, that I treat all pancreatic cysts the same regardless of family history. That doesn't play a role in what I'm doing. He said the same thing with respect to the condition of uncontrolled diabetes. And I bring up Dr. Bickle's care of Mr. Ambrose during this time because Dr. Bickle wrote in his notes throughout 20 and into 21 that Mr. Ambrose was experiencing uncontrolled diabetes. And
But is that germane to the
well, it is.
pancreatic? Why?
It absolutely is, because these are criteria of high-risk individuals. Now, I want to call the court's attention to a specific difference in the guidelines, how they treat high-risk stigmata, high-risk structures, high-risk features of the cysts versus the concept of high-risk individuals. There are some of the guidelines that say this doesn't apply. These guidelines that were where you just monitor the structures of the cysts themselves, they don't apply in instances when you are dealing with a high-risk individual. For instance, CAPS is one that it actually says this is specific to high-risk individuals, not the others that don't, some of them actually disclaim applicability to high-risk individuals. And we have a situation here where Dr. Shaw doesn't acknowledge the existence of the category of high-risk individuals. I mean, that's how absurd this is, that he's following the standard of care, because he doesn't even identify or utilize the aspects of the family history and the diabetes.
I don't
However,
want to
that's
interrupt, but
that's
I
not
want to
the only
Wait,
keep
thing.
us
hold on.
on point.
Yeah,
That's not,
Mr. Dillon, we're not gonna
Uh,
mix apples and oranges. We're
uh,
talking,
I'm sorry.
and that's why I've been so clear throughout this that the literature the defense cited to is the literature specific to high-risk individuals. And that's Exhibit D of the defense's motion, as well as all of the specific ones. I can cite the name of it, but it's the AGA, CAPS, and ACG in high-risk individuals
okay,
had a
Mr.
consensus
Tenor.
that patients have an MRI.
Okay, all right.
So, thank you.
I understand that, and I understand from my perspective, I understand that the study that was in your I think it's Exhibit E that you laid out on 14. It's my understanding that these this is referencing high risk individuals.
As
That's
well
Some
as
my
do, some do, and some don't, Your Honor, is my point. And my
What do
other
you mean
point
some
is
doing? Wait. What do you mean some doing, some don't? I want you to clarify that and point to why you're saying some doing, some don't. Because
I'm going to.
it's my understanding that the ACG, the AGA, the European, the the ACR with the radiologist and the European, they're all talking about high risk.
and as well
Not,
as Exhibit
Your Honor,
D,
not high
where the
risk individuals
defense,
always. Sometimes the
no,
concept of high risk is referring to the existence of these aggressive features, high risk stigmata. They use the term high risk as it relates to structural changes and not just issues regarding the family history.
But high risk is high risk. If you're
no,
high
I
risk,
disagree. That's what I'm trying to say,
okay,
Your
I'm not
Honor.
going to disagree with you. Go ahead, Mr. Dillon. Go on.
Okay,
Go on.
thank you. Um, However, in addition to the fact that Mr. Dr. Shaw has no appreciation for how diabetes might play a role, how the family history might play a role in how he's going to move forward, and he's only looking at the structure of those cysts. We have testimony from Dr. Wine that he ignored the growth from 2019 to 2021, that themselves, even following those guidelines that are focused purely on structure, that growth constituted aggressive growth, which creates high risk characteristics regarding the structures themselves. And so even if we were to say that we are within those guidelines, just relying on those, we see Dr. Wine repeatedly saying there's growth, there's change, this is what should have been done. Just a couple, so not only does he say that there was a total lack of appreciation of the family history and the diabetic condition, even if we just look at the growth that happened between 19 and 21, that constituted aggressive growth, which constitutes a high risk feature, which warranted the additional supervision. However, it's not just February 21 we're talking about. And by the way, I want to acknowledge one thing. Yes, it was longer than a year from 19 to 21. However, there was no MRI that was done in between that period of time. And so, in Dr. Wine's opinion, that was sufficient growth. 1 year or more, it didn't matter. It was from the last MRI that he had. And so, in Dr. Wine's opinion, that required higher surveillance than was provided at that time.
But what is he
I'm
relying
just
on
going to
though?
jump.
But
Pardon?
what is he relying on? Because we have he just can't say something in a vacuum. He has to have the proof to substantiate. And what I'm looking at is the report which compares all of the pertinent um societies and the guidelines. So he's talk, no pun intended, but sometimes talk cannot reference exactly what you're supposed to be doing. It has to be backed up. And what I'm looking at, and this is what I'm talking about, the doctor can say whatever he wants to say, till he's blue in the face. But if he doesn't have anything to substantiate it, that's going to be problematic. And that's where the court has to look at in terms of making a determination whether or not there's an issue relative to the standard of care, what's relied upon. You just can't make blanket statements. So you need to point me to something because not only did Mr. Turner indicate the study that they used, the JAMA surgery, which is the 2022 American College, I'm sorry, the American Medical Association, August 22 article. They also reference what you presented in your Exhibit Q. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not concerned with the words that come out of Dr. Wine's mouth. I'm concerned with what you have to substantiate it. So you could talk about diabetes, you could talk about the sides and what he thought, but in this point in time, I'm looking at this from the perspective of can I make a ruling as a matter of law? And I have documentation that's been presented by the defendant. So all of this, and I'm not saying this disparagingly, but all the puffing that Dr. Wine is saying is irrelevant unless you have something to back it up substantially.
Your Honor, in our brief, we are tedious in how we have gone through the different materials, the different guidelines. For example, on page 17 of our brief, we refer to the materials that were cited by the defense, the AGA clinical practice update on pancreas screening in high-risk individuals. And this this particular article laid out a number of different best practices. And in particular, we identified best practice advice number 9. Screening intervals of 12 months should be considered when there are no concerning pancreas lesions with shortened intervals, that is, with shortened intervals for screening, and or the performance of EUS in 6 to 12 months directed towards lesions
And that I
determined
think
to,
that's what we had here, 6 months. We
excuse
had
me,
six
Your Honor,
months.
if I may finish.
But answer my
It,
question though, didn't we? No, you have to answer my question too. No, you can't finish. Please answer my question. Didn't we have a situation here where the doctor ordered the MRI within 6 months?
we
You
did,
said it yourself, within 6 months to a year. And we
Your Honor,
clearly have a
in that category of findings, but we weren't in that category of findings. It's
what
the
are you
next
talking
sentence that
about? What are you
applies.
talking about? What are you
I'm
talking about?
trying to read you this best practice,
No, no, no,
and
no, no, no. You're saying stuff and then you want to jump to something else. What are you talking about in this category of findings? What are you talking about?
okay, what I just read to you, EUS in 6 to 12 months directed towards lesions determined to be low risk by a multidisciplinary team. We did not have that. We did not have a determination of low risk by a multidisciplinary team. That's when 6 to 12 months would apply.
Okay, why?
Instead,
Go ahead.
instead, Your Honor, we have the advice goes on to say EUS evaluation should be performed within 3 to 6 months for indeterminate lesions and within 3 months of high risk lesions if surgical resection is not planned.
Okay, but how,
New onset diabetes in a high risk individual could lead to additional diagnostic studies
you
and
said, wait, say
or
that
change in
again.
surveillance.
Say that again. New what? You said new?
New onset diabetes in a high risk individual should lead to additional diagnostic studies or
Okay,
change
you
in
said
surveillance interval.
new onset. This wasn't a new onset. He
It was
was already
uncontrollable.
diabetic. This isn't a
Yes.
new onset. Mr. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Dillon.
Well, I would just emphasize EUS evaluate. This is from their materials, their guidelines. EUS evaluation should be performed within 3 to 6 months for indeterminate lesions and within 3 months for high risk lesions. Okay. Now, our uh, Dr. Wine has testified that he considered there to be growth and that was an aggressive feature with respect to this. So even within these guidelines, that should have been followed up with a 3-month EUS at that time. However, Your Honor, I agree. There was an MRI, an MRCP that was done 6 months later. What happened after that? That was in August of 21. Okay, so even if there wasn't a breach in the standard of care in February of 21 by only ordering an MRCP in August of 21, the results of the MRCP in 2021 spurred even further breaches in the standard of care. And Mr. Tenori didn't even speak to what happened after that. So what we have in 2021, in August of 2021, we have Dr. Shaw now saying, "See me in a year." After he notes in that August of 21 MRI that there was additional growth of these cysts and additional as Dr. Wine identified, additional cysts that were identified. So we have additional growth in existing cysts. We have additional cysts being identified. Again, Dr. Wine testifies that this growth was in his opinion, of an aggressive nature, warranting especially because of family history and because of the diabetic condition and the hemochromatosis, warranted additional surveillance. But what does Dr. Shaw do? He orders, "Hey, see me in a year." And in that year-long MRCP that's done in August of 2022, guess what we find? Advanced cancer. Okay.
What
And
about
so,
February of 22 in between, Paul?
yeah, well, that's a great point. About the February 2022, Dr. Shaw testified that he never looked at it. He
Paul,
never looked at it. And so for someone to suggest that Dr. Shaw is somehow relying upon this 6-month interval as that's part of his treatment plan, it's just flat out erroneous. He testified clearly that he never saw the February 22 MRI results until the August 2022 MRI was done, and he was scheduling that appointment. Of course, at that time, Mr. Ambrose said, "You guys, I was going to you to prevent us finding this. I'm obviously not going to continue with you." And then he went on to Mayo from that point forward after the August 22 MRI diagnosis. So, Your Honor, there's not only was there and also in the meantime, in August of 21, that is when Dr. or Mr. Ambrose's diabetic condition was so out of control that Dr. Bickel felt compelled to actually double the diabetic medication that was being given to him, double the recommended dose by the manufacturer and the FDA. That's how significant that diabetic condition was at that time, is that he went off label to treat it. And yet that information was not reacted to by Dr. Shaw whatsoever in his diagnosis. And clearly, best practice advice number 9 from the AGA clinical practice update, as well as numerous other guidelines, suggest a heightened surveillance period. Mr. Tenori tries to argue that it was an either or, that you either do one or the other. I would just point out that the AGA guidelines that I'm looking at which were part of his materials, the AGA guidance when to screen for pancreas cancer, July 28th of 2020, on item number 7 says magnetic resonance imaging and endoscopic ultrasonography should be used in combination as the preferred screening modalities in individuals undergoing pancreas cancer screening. Again, Mr. Ambrose never had the benefit of an EUS of any kind until after August of 2022, which was 18 months after the first indication that he should have had that EUS. And that's according to the guidelines and according to Dr. Wine's testimony as to the application of those guidelines to this particular case. Your Honor, the standard of care testimony here clearly is clearly been breached according to Dr. Wine. He says so in at least 7 or 8 different particulars, as I've enumerated in my brief. And I would just very much appreciate the court again looking at the plaintiff's brief for all the detail that's been provided with respect to breaches in the standard of care, the breaches of the applicability of the guidelines, and all of the different time frames that we're talking about. And it's not just February 2021 timeframe, but also essentially every date after February 2021 until the August 2022 diagnosis.
Mr. Tenori.
May I? Thank you, Judge. So there's a lot to address there. Let me start with how Mr. Dillon tried to separate out high-risk individual, and therefore it's not what I'm representing to the court. Exhibit D of the defense's motion is surveillance of high-risk individuals for pancreatic cancer, and it's a meta-analysis, and it's from the Journal of Pancreatology. It was published in 2021, so just before this ad issue care. And it looked at, I'm going to cite this with absolute clarity to the court. It looked at the AGA clinical practice update on pancreatic cancer screening in high-risk individuals, an expert review. It looked at CAPS for individuals at increased risk due to familial pancreatic cancer. It looked at the ACG clinical guideline, genetic testing and management of hereditary gastrointestinal cancer syndromes. It goes on and on and on about high-risk individuals. And what did that meta-analysis conclude? The current guidelines provide recommendation on surveillance of high-risk individuals for pancreatic cancer. MRI or EUS should be used for surveillance. It did not require an EUS FNA, as Dr. Wine testified to. None of the guidelines did. So I'm not entirely sure where this is coming from. Again, this all has to do with whether or not, there's the black and white support of what Dr. Wine is saying. Mr. Dillon is offering to the court that, hey, growth over 2 years means he should be treated differently. Where is that? There's nothing to suggest that. It's very, very clear in all of the guidelines as to what growth over what time frame is considered worrisome, where there is going to be further testing. Nothing supports the notion from February of 2019 to what was seen then in February of 2021 that there were worrisome features. And the radiologist confirmed that. The radiologist in the report said no suspicious features, no worrisome features, no high-risk stigmata. He looked at him. He compared the two. This radiologist even said, repeat in a year. There's the American College of Radiology guidelines that this board-certified radiologist was following. That, again, Dr. Wine said if Dr. Shaw followed, he's in compliance with the standard of care. Dr. Shaw went above and beyond that. And so we then fast forward to August. Now, I didn't gloss over August just because I'm trying to hide the ball from the court. Because Dr. Wine's testimony on page 130 of his deposition, standard of care required an EUS FNA within 3 to 6 months of that February of 2021 MRI. That's what Dr. Wine testified to within 3 to 6 months of that study. Come August of 2021, according to Dr. Wine, he used the phrase, you could kiss him goodbye, meaning he's already dead because this is pancreatic cancer. So if we're going to start to say that, hey, more testing needed to be done thereafter, there's no proximate cause there. So I'm not really, this is why I was so focused on February of 2021, but I'm happy to address August of 2021 as well, because the radiologist compared all three studies, February of 19, February of 21, August of 21, and said again, no high-risk features. He said the cysts are stable in size and appearance relative to February of 2021.
All due
So,
respect, Mr. Tenori is testifying with respect to the testimony of the radiologist. We have a report. That's all we have.
but thank you, Mr. Dillon. Your expert didn't review any of the imaging studies to rebut any of the reports. And so there isn't an issue there in terms of whether or not there were any high-risk features, worrisome stigmata, suspicious features, any combination of those terms, or what exactly they are. And so those are what prompt in high-risk individuals the next phase of testing if it's indicated. Not all high-risk individuals undergo EUSs with FNAs. It's just, like, it'd be ridiculous to suggest that because that's patently false. And so in a high-risk individual, there needs to be high-risk findings on imaging to prompt the next steps. That is completely absent in this case. And that's why Dr. Shaw complied with all of these 5 studies, or excuse me, 5 guidelines, including specific ones for high-risk individuals. There's no issue here. There's no issue of fact.
Because
Page-
let me make
you're-
sure, we had the prior one in the MRI in 19. We have the one February of 21. And then it was referred to Dr. Shaw, and then Dr. Shaw completed the one in August of 21, correct?
Within 6
Yes.
months, correct.
And then he ordered another one a year out.
Well, because another MRI had already been ordered in February of 2022,
That's not why he did it.
well, it says
Well,
in the
in-
study itself, the February of 2021 MRI says repeat in 1 year.
But
What-
but it was repeated in the 6 months.
Correct. It was Dr. Shaw said in his note, due to his strong family history, I will repeat the MRI with pancreatic protocols in 6 months. If the size of those pancreatic cysts increase exponentially, I will consider an endoscopic ultrasound.
That's his February 21 note ordering the August 21 MRI. It is not the report from the August 21 MRI having anything to do with the February 22 MRI.
Well, but so
And just to be clear, on the Mr. or Dr. Wine testified at page 66, line 11 through 13. Yes, AGC, when they talk about high-risk individuals, they mention that 5 millimeters is a high-risk lesion. I just quoted to the court the ACG recommendation what to do when you have a high-risk lesion, and it's a 3-month surveillance. And Dr. Shaw had him on a 1-year surveillance after the August of 21 MRI. He didn't order another MRI until August of 22, and that's when cancer was found. It couldn't be more clear.
Mr. Dillon, can you please show the court where in the AGA guidelines a high-risk individual with a 5 millimeter cyst is required to undergo an EUS?
It says high-risk lesion, okay? And
But
I'm sorry, I'm not a gastroenterologist to define all of the different aspects of what constitutes
No.
a high-risk lesion.
All he said was, where was it defined in the guidelines? That's what the
That-
question was. We're not asking you to be to take on another hat. We're just asking you, where is it set forth in the guideline?
Let's be clear. I said they mentioned that a 5 millimeter is a high-risk lesion. And so I'm saying that the guidelines say if you have a high-risk lesion, then 3 months and with MRI and EUS is appropriate. I'm not
I-
saying that I have the citation right now. I might be able to find
but
it, but where it
but
says
you
5 millimeters is
cited
high risk. I mean,
you
at
just
some point
cited
in
to
time,
your
a
own expert's
gastroenterologist needs to
testimony. I'm
exercise
asking
some
where?
judgment.
Where's the support?
I read the AGA guidelines here. I read the advanced.
No, you that had nothing to do with a 5 millimeter cyst. Where in the AGA guidelines does it support Dr. Wine's testimony that a 5 millimeter cyst in a high risk individual requires
Show
by the
me
standard of care an EUS FNA?
show me the definition of a high risk lesion anywhere in the guidelines themselves. I mean,
I
a high risk
have
lesion.
repeatedly
Yeah,
on page
the
9 of my motion, high risk stigmata, specific features of
that's
the cyst
stigmata.
that
That's not the
shows.
same thing. That's not the same thing. You keep using that phrase high risk in front of any other noun that you want to use, and acting like these are all the same thing, and they're not.
No,
Dr. Wine says this is a high risk lesion in his opinion. He's a
Okay,
qualified
but what I'm saying
gastroenterologist.
is, hold on, stop right there. You said that in his opinion, but where is his opinion substantiated by the guidelines in the literature? He can say,
That's
and I think, hold on, and I said that earlier. He can say anything till the cows come home. I need to know where it is supported in the literature. That's why we're here. Because the court is being asked to make a finding that the standard of care has not been breached, and we're relying on the literature. I'm not going to rely on facts. I need to know. You said Dr. Wine has said that, but where is it supported by the literature? That's what I need.
he references the AGC when they talk about high risk individuals. They mention that 5 millimeters is a high risk lesion.
Show it to me.
I don't have that
But
citation.
then that's a
I
problem
suspect,
because today is the day and time set for the summary disposition. If you've got something refuted, you got to show it to me. You
Your Honor,
keep talking. Stop.
I I
Stop.
have the
Hold on.
testimony of,
You keep talking about this 5 millimeter lesion being a high risk. I need to see where you're supporting that. You just can't say it. I need to know. And that, like I said, that this is a daytime we put this over. If you can't support it, you have to have some support for it. You just
and
can't
also
say it,
not
and a doctor just can't say it.
just a 5 millimeter
But no, don't
cyst being
change
high
the
risk.
subject.
Well,
Don't
I'm
change the
not
subject.
changing the subject, but I'm going to include in my definition of high risk also one that grows in size by three
Okay,
millimeters.
where's that? Where's that? You just can't say
Looking, comparing, look, the defense acknowledges that growth of 3 millimeters in a year is significant. We have growth of 3 millimeters in a year from the February 21 MRI to the August of 21 MRI.
where's that? Show me that. Where is it
Your Honor,
that
I
there was
detailed it
growth?
extensively in my brief,
No, no, no.
but
I
I'll
don't
find
care
it.
about Mr. Dillon. I don't care about your brief. Show
I'm
me
going to,
in the literature or show me in the
no,
radiology report
I'm
where
going to,
it said
that's,
that there was growth, the more than three, that the size of the growth was three. Because I know they said that there was growth, and I know that
yes.
they said that there were other cysts. But I need to know because you're saying your whole thing is that because you're saying this 5 millimeters,
I'm
there has
not
to be
just
some
saying
support.
that.
Where is it then? I keep asking you.
I'm, Your Honor, look, this was rather dense material, and I spent a great deal of time laying these out in my brief, comparing the MRIs. I'm just going to go backtrack here through my brief and call the court's attention to it.
I don't want to
Um,
know in your brief. I want to know in the
that's what
documentation,
I'm talking about.
not your brief, Mr. Dillon. I need to know in the radiology report, the MRI report, where it was noted that these cysts were whatever dimension you're saying. You have to show
Thank you.
that to me.
Thank you, Your Honor. I will. Because I laid it out in my brief, is what I was
No,
trying
I
to say.
stopped saying that. I
Okay,
don't care if it's laid
I'm
out in
gonna
your
talk.
brief.
Exhibit 8 is the August 9th, 2021 MRCP. Exhibit 8 to my brief. I'm sorry to say it, the brief. It's in the August 9th MRCP, and it says pancreas. Multiple pancreatic cysts are again noted. The largest cyst in the in the ventral tail of the pancreas and measures 10 by 7 millimeters on slice 23 of series 3. This is of similar this is similar in appearance to prior exam. Okay. Dr. Wine took exception to that statement because it's not.
No, but he can't. How can he take? He didn't do the radiology report. He
Your
didn't
Honor,
read
I'm
them.
talking about the numbers that are reported in the previous report. There is
But
no
but
reference to a 10 by 7 in the previous report. Even
but the
comparing the reports themselves, it doesn't say 10 by 7 in the February 21 MRI. I mean, that's ridiculous. It says there are additional smaller sub-centimeter cysts throughout the body and tail of the pancreas. No pancreatic ductal dilation. Although the pancreatic cysts are similar in size and appearance to the prior exam from 7 months ago, they are increased in size when compared to an older comparison exam from 3 months ago, which is an error by the radiologist in what he's saying there. What Dr. Wine said is, look at what he's saying here. It doesn't make sense. That does not compute with what was on the prior exam, as noted in the report. As I clearly point out in here, the largest cyst from February 2021 was only 8 millimeters, not 10. In other words, there was continued growth of those cysts. The radiologist was wrong in what he was representing. That should create a lack of confidence in what's being said. And you don't rely on a radiologist to perform gastroenterology. You use them as a tool. But if you see a mistake, you should go and ask questions. And that's what Dr. Wine testified to.
okay.
In
All
other,
right.
so
You know
the
what?
one
You know
question,
what? Okay, I'm gonna tell you what, because we talked about this. I'm gonna deny the motion for summary disposition, but we're gonna set this for a Daubert hearing as to Dr. Y. So that, and Mr. Tenori, I understand why you were saying they sort of overlap. But I'll give you, because I know where we're going with this. So you can go ahead and if you need to at this juncture make an additional argument relative to the other motion, fine. But I'm pretty much at this point in time, based on what I've heard, convinced to say that we need to have a Daubert hearing.
Sure, Judge, I understand. And therefore I won't belabor the point. The other motion, I'll keep it to about 30 seconds. The other motion had to do with a lack of literature support for Dr. Wine's testimony of an EUS FNA specifically. He
Mhm.
didn't say an EUS alone, said EUS FNA. There is nothing in the literature to support that. And I mean, plaintiff's own literature confirms, but I understand the court is going to want a Daubert hearing on all of this. So I'm gonna break off my argument there. The thing that I'll ask is that in the order for each of these Daubert hearings, that one of two things: either the parties are confined to the literature that's before the court as it is. I think there's plenty for the court, and that's all that should come in. Or B, plaintiff makes any and all literature they plan on introducing at the evidentiary hearing available to the defense sufficiently beforehand. It'll depend on when it's scheduled, but the last thing I think even the court wants to do is spend significant chunks of time having new literature thrust upon it. And that's what I don't want to do either. I want it to be concise. And so that's why I'll ask. I think I mean, plenty in the record already that plaintiff was supposed to have offered. I think it should be confined to the literature already before the court. And that'd be my request for leading up to the Daubert hearing.
Okay.
we have no problem, Your Honor, complying with that request. We certainly would identify whatever literature we're going to be using, probably, well in advance and make it available. I
Okay.
did want to just briefly address this straw man argument. The FNA, the EUS FNA argument, Dr. Wine repeatedly testified that he was talking about undergoing an EUS, and probably, one instance he said probably an FNA. On other occasions, he just simply said EUS. It's a straw man argument to suggest that the only thing he was recommending was an EUS FNA. He was talking about EUS most of the time. Oftentimes he added with and possibly or probably an FNA. So it's a non-issue.
So then, Judge, I do want to address that because that's going to significantly alter how this is done. Because the defense, I saw this coming, and if we were really going to argue this motion before the court today, I would have briefed this. But first, on page 119 of Dr. Wine's testimony. It says, per your testimony, the standard of care required EUS with FNA in February, March of 2021. Correct.
Mhm.
Just to recap, and now this is on page 130. It's your opinion that the standard of care required Dr. Shaw to order an EUS with fine needle aspiration within 3 to 6 months of the February 21 MRI. I believe the monitoring more aggressively would include EUS, and I said with FNA or without, probably with FNA on page 136. So anything else about your opinion other than timely ordering an EUS FNA and speaking with the other providers, communication that Mr. Dillon keeps harping on. That's pretty much it. And so I don't want this to be a situation where now he's changing his testimony of,
He
oh,
can't,
wait, I don't have
and
the
he
expert
won't.
support of EUS,
And he's
FNA, and
not.
it's just an EUS. I think this Daubert hearing is, does he have the support for an EUS FNA?
With I strongly disagree. He's repeatedly said, and probably FNA. He's
Meaning
repeatedly
probably
said
not an
EUS
FNA.
without any reference. Excuse me, Mr. Torrey. He's repeatedly referenced the EUS without an FNA and with an FNA. And the mere fact that he said is not ordering an EUS with FNA, a breach of the standard of care, doesn't mean that not ordering a straight EUS isn't also a breach of the standard of care. One does not exclude the other. And this is a
Well,
ridiculous straw man argument that Mr. Tenori is trying to make.
Mr. Tenori,
It's clear.
the thing is, we'll deal with it. With
okay,
the EUSF and with FNA, we'll deal with it. And like I said,
okay,
what we'll have to do is, and once, and like I said, we do have Dr. Wine's deposition, and he can't backpedal. So, we will go to the particular aspect of it. And because I have his transcript in front of me, but like I said, we'll deal with it. But we'll stop recording and let's look and see, and this is going to be concise. Nobody's
Judge,
going to like, go
before we
ahead.
go off the record,
Hmm.
is the court confining the parties to the literature before the court already based on the briefs for the Daubert hearing?
We
Or
should,
whatever other literature that he referenced in his deposition.
That's before the court. I
right. So
attached all
Not
of the
anything,
it's not
letter.
it's not necessarily before the court.
what do you mean?
What?
Well,
If it's
I
in,
mean, when if he testified that the AGA guidelines said a particular thing, I pulled AGA guidelines to find what I thought was supportive of that, but he may have a more specific reference than I do.
Uh,
Okay, so
You
like I
know,
said, it's gonna have whatever it is, it's gonna have to be, I'm gonna give you there's gonna be a timeline and it has to be adhered to. And there's not gonna be any deviation from that. Whatever timeline the court sets that Mr. Tenori puts in his order, that is it. There's gonna be no deviation whatsoever from that. Okay, is there anything else for the record?